everyone. Welcome to Dumbing Down Data. I'm your host, Carol, and here we're talking to people in the tech space to learn all their best kept secrets on how to break in and navigate the industry. And today we're talking to Nate, and I can't wait for you to hear his story. The reason being, he was an archaeology major and a musician, and now he's managing a team of software engineers. Again, he's managing a team of software engineers coming from an archaeology and then musician background. This is why I started this podcast, is to show you that you can really come from anywhere to become in tech. And it's incredible what he was able to do. It doesn't take much. It just takes some passion, drive, and a little bit of luck. I really hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it with him. And he's just a wonderful person too. It was a pleasure to be here with him today. Can't wait to see you all there. All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dumbing Down Data. I am so excited because today we have Nate, and I briefly spoke about Nate in my introduction, but he's here and he's here to talk to us in person and share his story. And I just can't even, yes, we're finally here, Nate, right? Um, so I told Nate that I was gonna have like a little bit of what did I call it? Like a curveball at him. And what I wanted to do is ask him in his own words to maybe share a little bit about who you are, but also like what got us together in this podcast and like how this whole thing started. Because as I kind of brought it up a little bit in the introduction, you're a immense reason why this whole thing started, and I'm just so glad that you're alongside me here right now with me to do this whole thing and start it off. But I just want to hear from your own words, like, how did we get here? Why are we here today?
Great, great curveball. I'm so excited to be here, and I just love the concept you have here and the lens for technology, just making it accessible. I feel like is so important. Yeah, the story of how we got here is a really good one. I feel like it's a great example of people coming together from sort of at CTL where we were different departments, different positions, and I remember we were in a meeting together, and something sparked in terms of how we were approaching the same issue. And you reached out right after that just to chat more about the technology side and getting that other perspective and how we could, work together to help the users really at the end of the day. And from there I felt like it was a similar story getting into the podcast. You had this incredible idea of how to make technology and data more accessible for folks, and um, really that is exactly in line with how we came together. It's bringing technology into different spaces and seeing where the value is and how it can be used and how it can be understood. Um, so I'm really glad you reached out that day. So meeting.
No, it was it was like definitely it started off from just having a common, I guess, problem, I guess, from two completely different sides, like you said. And then now here we are creating a project that has nothing to do with CTL, but has everything to do with CTL at the same time, which is why, like, what even got the whole thing inspired. Nate, just like really also, just for those listening, it was he really helped me feel empowered myself to do something like this because I have technical background in some ways, but nothing like, the data scientist or the software engineer or something. So having Nate even almost kind of, what is the word? Um, really reinforce the feelings that I have about what I want to do and where I want to go with like my small bit of knowledge of technology, really helped me get this podcast out and in the open because I had this imposter syndrome, which I think we might talk a little bit about later. But I just didn't feel like it was anywhere near my realm of work, so I shouldn't even be touching it. But speaking to somebody who was like, yeah, maybe I had the same feelings. Like maybe this is something that you, as someone in training, can work with me on. It really helped me feel like I can actually take data by the horns. So it
Right.
just speak. So, but with that, Nate, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do at CTL, just in general?
Yeah, so I'm a software engineer at Crisis Text Line, um, working on the web app that is used, the platform as it's called, where our volunteers can interact with texters in a lot of ways, and supervisors as well. Um, Things have changed a little bit over the past year for me there. So my current role, I'm a technical lead on a team that's really in charge of the conversation itself between a volunteer and a texter. And I've also moved into a people management role. So I'm overseeing four other developers who I've worked with closely for the last year. So they're all really, really good folks. So that's a nice, easy transition, luckily, into what is a very different day to day for me. But yeah, that's where I'm at now.
And I think it's going to be really exciting because, as much as we can get done today, we can get done and talk about, but Nate has a wealth of experience and knowledge, and now including people management. And I think it's going to be one of those really interesting topics of the differences between, software engineering and actually being right in front of the code, and also then working with people who are in front of the code. So
Right.
super excited to talk a little bit more about that. But we talked a little bit about before the show, before we started filming, like how we might structure it, but we don't really know how it's going to go. So we're just going to see as we go, but then everybody else will get a little taste of it later. But my favorite question, because it really fascinated me as I was learning a little bit about you, is how did you get into all of this software engineering and data and everything like that?
Sure. Yeah. I was a late bloomer to software engineering, and really like any version of coding that people get into. So I was actually an archaeology major at Appalachian State. I was really into history, still am, and was kind of following that track, um, and playing music at the time with a few friends. We had formed a little band that was really starting to get some legs at the time, in comparison to just small bands of the world. Um, but yeah, when I graduated, we felt like we really wanted to make a run at that. So I spent a few years uh, playing music, trying to make a career out of that, and traveling around the Southeast a little bit, playing little dive bars and little venues and things like that. And one of the big lessons that came out of that whole experience was that, a band at that level is really like a very, very small business. And, we didn't have money or resources to hire anyone for any of those auxiliary roles. So we were all playing the marketer, the financier, the web developer is what I ended up taking on. You really uh, trying to get something off the ground, and there's a lot more that goes into it than just playing the shows or writing the music. And so we were learning a lot, and I think for me it was a big opportunity to kind of see where my interests were, getting to kind of dabble in a lot of these different areas. And one of them, just kind of on the side of getting the name out there and marketing, you have to have a good social media presence and a web presence. And I'd always had a little interest in web development, but just didn't even know where to begin. So I started trying to make a site for the band, which way back in the day, it started as like a WordPress site. And then it was a Wix site, which is just a little drag and drop website editor that really anyone can use, which I recommend. It's a really cool product if it's still around. I haven't used it in years, but uh, those were there's not much coding involved. WordPress, you write a little CSS and HTML, but I just found the creative aspect of it, the design of the page, gathering that content and making those decisions, and seeing that people were actually, the site actually had traffic, people were going there and reacting to it. That was kind of my first moment where I fell in love with delivering something onto the web that people could use. And so it kind of built from there. We had a few bands that we always played with, that were just close friends, and ended up doing a website for one of them, that they used for a little while. And even there was a local pub that we used to always play right there in Boone, North Carolina, that I uh, helped start a website for them as well, which they're no longer in business, unfortunately. But it was seeing these opportunities where there were other folks that, in my circle, that wanted to get into that space onto the web and have that visibility, but didn't really know how to approach the task. And I barely did either, but I just, it was an opportunity to just kind of work these different projects from different angles. So that was really the first. That was the starter of it all, and I was building sites at the time, starting to encode and random stuff, anything I could think of, just because it was interesting. Most of which never made it into any kind of public setting, and it was around that time that the band kind of fell apart. Everybody was just getting to an age where they were going different ways, and had career opportunities, were moving, that kind of thing, which is a common story in that world. And so for me, uh, I turned to see what kind of career opportunities there were in tech. I started at a really sort of bottom level. Nothing against quality assurance engineers; they're very important, but it's not even really a common as common title anymore to have a separate role for that. But yeah, I got an internship as a what was it, junior QA technician intern for the summer. Um, Really just doing end-to-end testing, manual testing. They would, the developers would push code onto like a staging environment, and I would sit there and just try to break it all day basically, and see if I could find anything that was going on. And kind of built up from there in the QA world. Any of the QA folks listening will know the test automation became and still is a big thing. So I was using um, tools like Selenium, which I think is still pretty popular, which is a testing framework that runs in a web browser. And so you can do really comprehensive UI testing where you're kind of clicking around the page, have automation that's clicking around the page and testing your workflows and stuff. But I really, I knew that the whole time I was really trying to work towards software engineering, because that's where you're really building, and in particular front end software engineering, because I was still chasing that sort of creative path, where there would still be a little bit of allotment of, that design role, and I'd be able to make some of those creative decisions. So really at that time, and I think this is common amongst colleagues of mine that I've talked to, is especially when you're coming into it without a computer science degree, which I did not have, as I mentioned. It feels really daunting to get in and then to move up, especially into that software engineering role. There's so much to know, and I hear this all the time with friends who are just trying to get into coding for the first time. It can be really overwhelming from the outside, even specifically software engineering, even specifically front end software engineering. And so it's kind of hard to tell where to start. There's a million different languages and frameworks and tools and all that, and it can be kind of overwhelming. I think what worked for me at that time was picking something as specific as I could, and just trying to get good at that one thing or one or two things. I started working in React at that time, which is still super popular, but had kind of already blown up by then, as a front end framework, and made, you know building out websites in JavaScript a ton easier. And I was also just trying to learn as much as I could. I think that's another key thing at that stage, is that there's so much information out there. Again, it can be overwhelming, but it's really just a blessing, the resource pool, the training that is out there for free on any of these languages and frameworks and all that, or books that are fairly affordable. And so I actually had an opportunity with that company. They had a program where they would pay it's either 2/3 or 75% of your the class by class tuition if you wanted to take night courses. It was like a continuing education program that they had through there, if it was applied to the track that you were on. So I was living in Durham, North Carolina at the time. I ended up taking some classes at NC State. They had a certificate program. I can't remember the name of now. It was
Like a
very
boot
basic.
camp?
It was similar to a boot camp, but it was really yeah, I guess it was kind of the 4-year university version of a boot camp. What they would think of, they tried to build a boot camp because it was still kind of structured in a normal like 3-hour courses kind of a way, and I think it was supposed to take a year to complete, so it wasn't quite as I guess like fast paced and intensive as like a 3-month boot camp where you're really like all in is. And it was tailored toward folks like me who were working full time but needed some night learning options. So I did that for about a year. um, with those classes, they were really helpful. It's great to get into a classroom with other people because you can not just network, but you can ask questions to real people. You have an actual person who's a teacher who you can ask questions to, which can be a little difficult if you're doing sort of the YouTube or LinkedIn Learning or Pluralsight version of things. And so that was a really good experience. I was able to kind of gauge where I was and where my growth needed to be amongst people who were in a very similar place that I was. They were learning, they were early in their computer science learning path, so to speak. And so I ended up interviewing, inside that company for internally, that a job became available for software engineer one, and which is the intro position for a software engineer, and it's kind of right on the backside of those classes. And I remember just studying kind of anything and everything, a lot of which didn't really come up. There's also great resources now, I should mention, for interviewing for software positions, because it's such a specific kind of interview um, in terms of what's involved. And so uh, I didn't really have those resources at the time. I've got a little dog here who's going to be
Aw.
loud, but
Oh,
he's
that's good. No, we love dogs. I
there.
love
Hopefully,
dogs.
hopefully it's not too much. Um, but yeah, the interview I thought went okay, and ended up getting the position. And from there, you know, the learning can really take off because you're suddenly doing it 8 hours a day. And again, you're learning from all the folks around you. I always still today look for mentors in my space and in my circle that I can really latch on to for just growth. And I think that's a really crucial um, part of the process, is being open to that learning, and finding people who are willing to like give the time to like meet you where you are, and help you on that track. And there's lots of them out there, so that's definitely a big one. I'll fast forward a little bit. I worked there for a few more years. I moved into a software engineer two position, which is really just moving from sort of uh, taking in user stories or little tasks of work that are already well defined, and saying like, okay, I'm just going to code this up real quick, to moving into a position where you're like helping make some of those decisions. You're thinking more about how the system should be designed. You're a part of those conversations. You're becoming more of a important piece of the team dynamics and what goes into how you approach your work, from process to just uh, code ethics and code clarity and all that. You're just kind of, it's that stepping stone of really starting to be a part of all those conversations that are shaping the direction of the product. Um, and that was a really good time. It was right around then that I had a coworker leave and come to CTL, who, speaking of which, was a mentor of mine and still is.
Which, by the way, for we keep saying CTL, but crisis text line is CTL.
Crisis text line. Sorry,
Well,
yes.
yeah, we see Crisis Text Line. Shout out to Crisis Text Line, which is where we both work and well, formally I work. I guess I just am leaving in like a couple days actually, but yeah, Crisis Text Line for those of you who don't know is like what we're referring to.
Yes, and a perfect segue there, because when I first heard about Crisis Text Line, it was this dream job of a place to be working. It was when Danny, who I was just talking about, had come over there. He's telling me about it, about the culture and the mission and the values of the organization. Um, and yeah, I think it's worth touching on. I was behind the product of the place I was. We were building solutions for libraries and librarians and public universities, marketing materials for libraries, scheduling tools, that kind of stuff, and definitely felt like we were doing some good there. And yet, there can be this separation that exists when you're on the engineering side to the product, because you have that, typically, that product team layer that's in between you and the customer. And it's possible to fall into a space where you're like, well, code is code is code. It's different from company to company to company. It doesn't really necessarily matter the product. I'm still, focused on the software side of things. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I will say, coming to Crisis Text Line was really where I found that there's an extra layer that can be there, which is the mission that you're involved in, and just caring about uh, what you're getting out to the user every time you're delivering software, and caring about the platform being stable and maintainable, because it's important, the work that's being done, and being surrounded by people who also care about what's going on. They you know it is a job at the end of the day, but you sense that difference when people are not approaching their work as a kind of like a clock in for a paycheck and I clock out, but really care about what they're doing and what they're working on. It makes a huge cultural difference at the organization. So that was somewhat new to me. It was just a different, slightly different culture than I had come from. Again, no shade for the company I was at previously. It's a great place, but just not quite the level that something like Crisis Text Line has. So that was really inspiring to me, really motivated me and made me want to just dig in even further. Um, and by the time I had come over to Crisis Text Line, I was feeling more confident in myself as an engineer, and so was able to kind of help start making more decisions, and really just uh, try to help push the team in the right direction, those kinds of things. And so it was those roles that I think ended up, you know, making it possible for me to move into a senior software engineering role, which was just pretty recently actually, and then a couple months later into the tech lead on the team that I'm on. And you mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. I was already feeling that with the tech lead thing. I really haven't been doing this all that long, comparatively speaking. But I think one final point I'll put on this very long story is, another thing I've found that works is really following where your passions and skills are within software engineering. I know some really, really great engineers that are invaluable when it comes to solving complex problems the right way in code, um, and yet don't have any interest in moving into a there she is, that's Matilda.
So cute. Oh,
Don't
Matilda! Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
she's in view.
She comes and says
um,
hi. I'm more than happy to say hi to Matilda. That's the cutest thing
she's
ever.
down there, I don't know.
Oh,
uh,
it is.
yeah, but maybe don't have that interest in moving into a role where you're really stepping away from code, by in its nature. You're moving into, um, like I said earlier, like process questions, team dynamics, um, forming the roadmap of the work with the product team. And so it's really just different than a senior staff engineer role. And so I think, um, finding what you are naturally drawn to, which for me was sort of, team efficiency and, how we're working together, collaboration, communication. Those have all been things that I have always just gravitated towards in terms of, relentlessly trying to improve them. I think that was kind of the natural path, was moving towards what ended up being, a eng manager one, I guess, is the entry role, but just early on people management, which is something that I've only been doing now for about a month, and something I'm still learning, very much so. It's a completely different skill set, than what software engineering is, and you kind of have to wear a slightly different hat. I know we might be able to get into that more later, but I'll stop there. I think that's the tale.
I mean, there's so much that got me thinking, like, as you were talking about it, but it's like one thing that really stuck with me was when you were talking about your passions, because like I'm in data, I work in technology. I'm about to move to an amazing new company, Skyhive. Shout out to Skyhive.
Yeah.
That also works in technology, and they do, they do a lot of stuff around data. And but what's interesting is just like what you said, it's like you have to really believe in what you're doing. So I think that we have this concept that software engineers or data scientists, they need to be coding and they need to know like the mathematical equations of how to do a certain something, but like really it's also like what you're doing, like who you're doing it for, and like what the mission is that you're doing it for. It like all really matters. And like I don't know, for me it's like I'm teaching about it, but on a lens of not necessarily like very technical, but I'm in the same boat of just like growing that passion, same thing within the
Um,
whole technological realm. So it's really interesting because it got me kind of thinking of like your trajectory being like, okay, like if I was working at a clothing store and I was like a sales manager, like, doing the sales for them. And then all of a sudden I'm managing the store. Like, you're kind of like in the same store and you're just getting more responsibilities for the same area based on different
right.
skills, and you're gaining more skills. And then you start figuring out what you're good at and what you really like when you're still working in that realm, which for you would be software engineering, but now you're managing people who are also doing software engineering. And it's like so connected, all of it.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's a great, example, because there's an aspect there that is, needing to, I think, walk in those steps, in those shoes, to be able to effectively manage people in a given industry. And I've just recently been talking to some friends and folks I've worked with previously since I've been moving into this, and I've been reaching out for any tips and help I
Mhm.
can get. Um, and they talk about experiences they've had where a manager has been hired because they had management experience, and the thought was, well, management experience is management experience is management experience, and they were coming from a different industry. And I think to an extent there's some amount of truth there. I mean, there are skills, um, that you develop, in terms of supporting people and helping them grow and reach their goals, and, communicating the needs of the organization, and all those things that go into it. But at the same time, so much of the time I spend chatting with my direct reports is a more specific issue that they need to, you know, be met with and need to talk out, you know. And a lot of times it's a coding problem or something specific, that being able to draw on that experience, I think, is such an important part, you know, of being able to do that effectively.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's just like it's just very interesting to see when we think about management or anything to do with a role within management or being managed. I'm always like wondering, like, is it really about the skills involved, or is it really about like the passions involved, and also like how you're going to put your best work forward? You know, we cannot grow those skills too. So I think that I will be very interested to hear a little bit more about well, I had a question, kind of like a sidetrack of what we were doing, but was really curious about, do you think that there really is any difference between, let's say, managing a group of software engineers versus managing a team of, let's say, for me, I don't know, a training specialists or customer success managers or somewhere in like a non-technical realm, other than maybe knowing like the diehard skills, do we need to know anything different as like a manager? When we're
It's
looking
a
at that.
great question, and I'll say up front, I this is something I'm still learning. So I'm so new to this role that I'm trying to kind of figure it out as I'm growing in the role as well. But I do think there's a lot of overlap there. I think, you know, meeting people where they are is in and of itself a skill that is probably valuable across management in all industries. And I think one thing that, you know, a lot of people have experienced in the past is having a manager that is kind of hardlined, feels like they know the right way to do things, and they have sort of one, you know, playbook that they're drawing from, kind of whomever they're mentoring or managing. And I've already found that that just doesn't seem to be a good way of approaching it at all. People have very different needs, and they bring different things to the table. You know, not everybody fits into one box. And again, we were talking about what um, you know, what do you gravitate towards in the technology world, and there's a lot of different ways to go. Not everybody is going the same direction or wants the same things in terms of their career growth or where they're headed. And so I think, you know, understanding that, really paying attention to listen to what where people want to go and what they're interested in and where their areas of growth might be, is such an important first step. And that's just true with, you know, it's software is a team sport. I think that is often overlooked, especially for people who haven't been in it. You think of the coder like sitting in the dark in the basement kind of by themselves, you
I
know, just
always think that.
like green
Exactly.
lines coming down, right? Yeah, it's so much different from that in any kind of professional software development world I've ever been in. It's so collaborative,
Yeah.
and it relies on shared ownership of work. I mean, that is such an important piece. And so that what I was talking about in terms of meeting someone where they are, it goes for teams as well. When you join a new team, you there's not a playbook of how that group of five individuals will work. You know, a lot of people in the industry know Scrum or Agile as these frameworks for working more efficiently, and you those aren't things that you can sort of check go through the checklist and just make sure you're doing all of those pieces. They're tools that some combination of those tools work well for different groups, and it's just about finding what that recipe is and iterating on it until it, you know, tastes a little better each time, to continue on that analogy. But um still listening and finding what is already working and what could need some improvement is such an important part of kind of entering that space.
Well, it's like it's very much I mean, I keep saying this, but it goes back to like that human part of everything that we do, whether it's technology or any other type of role, we like I mean, it with one of the things that caught my attention what you said was like seeking those mentors. Like, why
Mhm.
are we seeking mentors when we're dealing with technology, which is technical? Because it's like there's humans behind the technology that we're working with, and like there's creativity behind it, which we were really talking about, and we'll go into it maybe probably another time. But like, I just think that there's so much human based around this kind of work that like we just don't we have nothing we're so blind to if we're not in it, and that's why I think
Right.
that this podcast was so important, and why you're so important to me, Nate, because it's just like being able to really remember that there's so much that we can do outside of like just thinking of it from a technological perspective. There's like creativity, there's problem solving, there's people, there's collaboration, there's like a common goal and a common mission involved in it. There's also growth, like you're coming
Mhm.
from someone who was not anywhere near software engineering. You were doing archaeology, and like now all of a sudden you're doing this, and now you're managing people, and like these are all different skills. And actually one of the questions I also had about was like, how did you search for the first role actually that you looked for, and how did you almost argue your point that you should be given that job in QA? I was just curious about that. It was sort of
Yeah. I had a connection for that company on the way in. So referrals are, are a big thing, which I just happened to luck out there. So um, I I still very much struggled with that interview, and I think there had to be some convincing there because I just didn't have much of a technical background other than just that ad hoc web development stuff. And this goes forward to all interviews I've done since, but something I was really intentional about in that first conversation was, you know, I can learn what I need to learn. I have a passion for this. I want to grow. I'm not there yet, and just sort of acknowledging the skills that we're missing, and being okay saying, no, I don't know what that is, but I'll go out and figure it out, and just bringing that mentality of this is a good investment on your part. And it was a weird way to think of it, but just like I'll grow into the position, and hopefully even beyond it was my ultimate goal. And so just getting that across, it's today I still think that's a really valuable, when I sit in on interviews of new candidates, I always look for that, you know passion for continued learning and continued growth, and wanting to do this, that just genuine interest in it. Gosh, I think that was it. I'll let the dogs bark for a second.
Matilda. Matilda's excited. She wants to talk a little bit more
She
about
is,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
I love it. But no, I think I mean, it keeps becoming more interesting as I talk to you, just because it's like things like referrals, like the job before Crisis Text Line, I got having no notion of whether or not I would be ever qualified. And it goes back to this imposter syndrome. I'm like, could I really do this? Could I really be making this salary? Could I really be working with these clients and these types of people in this kind of a company with this type of a background? And then, it's just like those like little growing building blocks, and like being able to sell yourself, being able to like really believe in your passion, because I think that we are so unaware that our passions are our indicators of our strengths. And like we may feel unqualified for something, but maybe you got hooked into this software engineering because there's a part of you that was telling you that this is where you're meant to be, but you're going to change the sphere of it here at CTL in its own way. And I think that that we
Right.
forget that like we may not be quote unquote qualified, but like we really are. We're just like not aware of it ourselves. It's like my therapist, actually, she told me this. I was talking to her the other day about my experience having gotten this new job, and like all of these like emotions behind it, and how like cool, calm, and collected I was about it. And she was just like, that's what confidence is. And confidence is the
Mhm.
belief in yourself. It's not about like looking big and buff. It's just like I believe that I'm best capable of this job. And that's why I really I mean you helped me in my confidence for sure, being able to be in front of you and in front of all these people talking about a topic that I didn't think I had as much knowledge about that maybe I do have, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Stepping into that, just jumping in is such a big part of it, right? And you find you might be good at things that you didn't expect to be, or, uh, you know, at least identify things that you can improve on. I think it's the first step.
All right, so I guess we're kind of coming into a closing of the general part of this podcast, which is what's going to lead me to a couple other really important questions that I think the two of us really agree upon. The first one is, why do you think it is so important for people listening, for other people, for anyone who's listening to inspire other people to know about, why is it so important to understand at the very least the basics of technology and data, or just like break into the surface of it, which I think listening to it, you're already doing so, but why do you think so in your own words?
Sure. Yeah. I think we're all seeing, for better or worse, this it- technology becoming just such a huge part of everyone's lives in terms of how we interact socially, or all the way to how we build up our grocery lists and everything in between. It's such an important part of everything day to day, and I think it's even somewhat unavoidable, in a lot of ways. And so
It's true. It's
it
unavoidable. It's
really
like the perfect word, like need to, basically.
yeah, and sometimes it's incredibly frustrating that that's the case. And I notoriously get frustrated by technology on a day-to-day basis, and I think understanding the process of what goes into building these things, even at a basic level, and just kind of some of those basic workings, is a really great insight into how you're interacting with all these different pieces of technology in your life. And so it can really kind of make sense of those. It can help you appreciate certain things, and identify, what could be better, which is just a good thing for all of us to be doing. And that goes, even I think, into a lot of industries professionally. For people, there are technologists in some way that they're working with. And so it's just an important piece of bridging that gap. And I think, the more we do that from different perspectives, the better things will be. It goes, from my side of things, on the in the engineering world, there's a lot of poor decisions that can be made when we don't reach across the aisle, across the department, or into another industry, and really try to understand, uh, not just the people we're building something for, but what different perspectives and different pools of knowledge can bring to how we're even thinking about the problem. Like a crisis text line, uh, involving the people who have all that knowledge and experience in the mental health world, is an incredibly crucial part about how we're even thinking about the service that we're providing. And I don't think engineers on their own would necessarily make some of those same decisions, some of the right decisions. I think that's true across the board. And so the more that anyone from wherever you're coming from is connecting to people in technology, and becoming involved, even in a basic way, I think will drive the general trend of how we're using it in the right direction, and
Mm.
just make it better, kind of for all people, and in different ways.
It's almost like the more that people who feel like they are the least um, important to be able to have a conversation about it are the people that should be empowered to, because it's going to make everybody's experience better. I mean, even just from our own experience talking to each other, and like how we come from very different spheres, but my general feelings, I mean, the meeting we were in was because our team was having a problem technologically that we were with you and product talking about, and like trying to find a way, a commonality of how can we solve it so that everybody involved will have a good resolve. And I think that if you feel out there listening that you don't have a say in the conversation, you may be the most important person that we need to have that conversation with. So it's all kind
Yeah.
of really connected. Just like the empowerment side of it, I think is just like going to be really crucial for everybody.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think there's that wall anymore like there used to be, that is sort of technology and people who are into that, and then sort of the rest of us. It just is so much more interconnected. And so yeah, those conversations are really important.
It's so true. And Nate gave me, I actually talked to him a little bit about it, and he kind of gave me a few tips and tricks, but I wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit about what you think, like how could somebody listening maybe get a little bit more involved in this conversation? How could they learn more about it? I know Nate gave me some really general but really good tips, and it kind of almost goes back to what you were talking about, like finding what you're interested in, because there's so much out there, but how could people maybe find more out?
I think just, listening to this podcast every single episode.
I love it. Oh my. It's all they
So,
need, really.
all here. No, I think I know I emphasize this a bit, but those human connections and mentorship relationships have been so important to me, and I think can just be so important. So for anyone who, at any level really, but especially if you feel like you're looking from the outside at the sort of overwhelming and somewhat intimidating world that is software and technology, reaching out to the people in your lives that are more involved in that or have that passion. If you have folks in your circle like that, um, in my experience, they're all very eager to help and talk about it and give resources out and all that stuff. And it's a great place to start because everyone who is in the industry has been through that same process of feeling overwhelmed, you know having that sense of, I'm terrible at this today, I just can't figure this out, and overcoming that again and again. And it's part of the process, and I think just it helps break down that wall to really talk to somebody and have them just explain that it's like a very approachable thing, really more approachable than it seems.
I love that. I think that's actually such it's very philosophical in my head, but the concept of having mentors or people that you can just like ask questions to. I mean, like it makes a big difference just being able to have someone dumb down those topics for you so that you
Mhm.
can dumb down your topics for them. It's just like we're all here learning, and we're all here to teach. So I think that's actually not what I was expecting. You threw me a curveball because I wasn't expecting you to say that. So I really love that actually a lot, and something that I truly will take for myself as well. So I appreciate that a lot. And I think honestly, at this point, Nate, we have so much content to give to this world that I can't wait to keep going into. I think that we just had a really great conversation touching on just almost like the imposter syndrome of like how do you start, how do you know that like you can actually be involved in these conversations. Like this was just so much fun overall. I loved it. I'm so glad that we finally got to get together and do this and share a little bit more about your story, which I'm just so grateful that you're here on a Saturday doing for me. So this was just so much fun. I'm so glad Matilda got to tell us a little bit more about her and her experiences as well. So that was great. But I'm just so excited to see this evolve and continue. And I got a lot out of it. So I hope you did too.
I really did, and I appreciate so much you taking the time to. I think I said at the beginning, but there's this is such a great perspective on the accessibility of everything that we're talking about, just to tie it back around. So I will be carefully listening for any more content coming, and I hope to be involved as much as I can. And I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited. And Nate, I have another question, one more curveball at you, but what makes you your happiest you? What makes you just super happy?
Oh, good question. A tough one,
Well,
but
it's gonna be a couple curveballs. I couldn't just don't go with one. I
not
think
just
at least a second
one.
one.
Yeah, I think because of, you know, I do love being in that technology space, but maybe because of that work, um, that release from work, that is my version of being in technology now. For me, stepping away and still losing my head in creating music is really where I um most easily, I think, hit that flow, that kind of like, whoa, it's 2 a.m. How long have I been doing this kind of a thing? And
Oh, I
so
love that.
for me, yeah, it's just that step away. And I know, everyone has that thing that just is a passion, I guess is the way to say it. But that's my release these days still.
I love that. That's cool. It goes to remind everybody that we're all just being us and human, and we all have our creative flow. And I love that you use that word. It's the book I'm reading right now, is the book Flow by Mihaly. Oh my God, I cannot pronounce this person's name, but it's a really good book if anyone's listening and wants a good book. But
Uh,
that's amazing. But in any case, Nate, I will see you soon, I'm sure. I can't wait to talk about this a little bit more further, but this was just so much fun. I had so much fun with you. So
Me
always.
too. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. All right, everybody. We will talk later in another episode of Dumbing Down Data. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.